first up, Aphex Twin. Tell us about it, Dan.
Yeah, Aphex Twin Cheetah got an 8.2, and I'm pretty sure everyone listening to this podcast probably knows who Aphex Twin is, but if for some reason you don't, he's a British electronic musician, super famous for Window Liquor and Come to Daddy, which I'm sure you've seen the music videos of because they were incredibly famous. But he sort of went on a hiatus in 2001. It wasn't like announced or anything. He just released the album. No one really knows how to say the name of it, but like drug use.
Drug use.
I think it's
clever
drug
joke.
Use. Yeah. He goes on like a unannounced hiatus in 2001, and then he releases a little bit here and there, the Analord series, an album that he never really officially claimed, but it's obviously him under the Tuss. But then in 2014, just like sort of out of nowhere, he just comes back and he releases a new album called Cyro, and then more EPs, and everything's pretty well reviewed. Maybe not as much as his stuff in the past, but yeah, he's just back, and now this is another EP, Cheetah. Before we get into this one, did you guys like Cyro and those subsequent EPs up until this one?
Yeah, so I was, obviously like just about everybody, a huge Aphex Twin fan, and probably came to him somewhere around like, I don't know, when those Analord releases first started happening. And it was weird because it's like he consistently released music basically between 2001 and 2014's Cyro, but it was like on such a like low stakes format, it was just sort of like exclusive vinyl releases and then like something under another name. And it's always baffled me a little bit, but it was like everybody was waiting for him to like do something proper and do something like on the scale that he used to do when he was like truly just one of the heavyweights of sort of the 90s, early 2000s. And Cyro was basically that album. And I thought it was fantastic. And I'm really happy that he's releasing the EPs. I loved Cyro. The EPs have been, kind of mixed bags, but he's such a singular talent that I've like loved hearing more stuff from him basically every 7-8 months now.
Yeah, so I think I came to Aphex Twin fairly late and sort of, definitely dived into like his biggest albums from, the 90s and obviously Drug Use, and definitely liked it. Kind of always hated the fact that my iTunes library was always never, I could never get it right with Aphex Twin. I love that Tuss record though. I really, really do. That's like one that I, to this day, will still go back to and play endlessly. And, I think I kind of fell into that, like, you kind of need to love Aphex Twin. Like you're supposed to, you know what I mean? And, his music definitely backs up the, I don't know if I want to call him like legendary quality, like the name. But when he started releasing these new albums, like Cyro, I listened to it, but I don't know. I didn't like immediately really get into it and still never really fell in love with it. And these other new EPs, especially this one that we're going to talk more in depth about, I'm a little lukewarm to them. How about you, Dan?
I've been a fan for a long time. I think I have a similar story to Gabe. Basically, I think I came in pretty much the same time around when Analord series was coming out, and I mean, there's a period in my life that Aphex was probably my favorite artist. Not as much anymore, but I was pretty excited when Cyro came out, and I did like it. But honestly, I listened to it, pretty heavily when it first came out, and I honestly can't remember the last time I listened to it. It like really kind of just like the hype got me, I think, more than the actual content. So I don't know if it was actually that great, but the subsequent EPs, I really liked that computer controlled acoustic instruments EP. I listened to that more than Cyro. In fact, I listened to it in between listening to the new one, and I just really love the sound of it and really like the idea of like it being computer controlled acoustic instruments. I'm a sucker for like just, you know, processed music, like just like the way it was made is like kind of more important than it sounds like Reich and Cage and all that shit. Like, huge sucker for it. So I really, really loved that EP. But yeah, I mean, I think like honestly, his output so far, like since coming back, hasn't been completely up to snuff. But I do also think like Darin was kind of saying, you know, you think of all these like classic Aphex Twin albums like from the past, but he honestly, like in between all that, has a ton of like singles and EPs and things under other band names that really kind of aren't that great and no one talks about. So I think those just kind of get forgotten in people's mind. He has like this perfect discography up until Cyro, but I think that's really not the case.
I don't know about that. I mean, Aphex Twin, well, Richard D. James, as his real name is, and all of his projects, he's the kind of artist that like inspires like fervent, you know, fandom. Like he's got hardcore fans, a huge cult following, even though he's a juggernaut of music, just in general. And he works perfectly because just fans of music will love like his major statement albums, which are total classics of electronic music. But then those hardcore fans, and he's got a lot of them, just devour everything he puts out. And yes, he's put out a lot of like strange one-off type things, lots of EPs, lots of like one-off, you know, another band name or something like that, or artist name. And, you know, I'm the kind of person where I love all that shit like completely. I think to love Richard D. James and to be a huge fan is to love all of that little shit. And, you know, it's like just, it's generous of him to just give us so much stuff. You know what I mean?
No, I agree with you. I'm not saying that stuff is garbage. It's just that it doesn't rise to like a classic level. I mean, something like Polygon Window or whatever, like, you know, that it's okay to listen to, because I am one of those big fans. I think on my computer I have like literally everything he's ever released that you can find. So I love it, and I eat up anything he releases. But the general public, which I think is what you were getting at as well, only remembers like these classic albums. They don't know about these little, you know, do they even know about Analord series or whatever? And the Analord series is great, but you know, I think it just kind of gets, everyone just remembers those classic juggernaut albums and kind of like makes him seem like a little more perfect than he actually is. Well,
let's dive into this one. What you were telling me a little bit about the name of this Cheetah EP comes from?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit of like a synth fan and shit. Not nearly to the level of Aphex Twin, but this EP is named after a synth called the Cheetah MS-800, which is like notorious for being the least user friendly and like unnecessarily complicated, just like worst synth basically ever made. And it's just like something like, it's almost worthless. I mean, it costs a lot of money because it's like rare, but like in use, it's like no one can use it. So of course, who else would do an album like based around this like fucking obscure, ridiculous instrument than Aphex Twin, which is another reason I love him, is for just digging out all these like weird ass like, how does he even know that this exists, you know?
Yeah, I don't know if it was Cyro, but there was some like really long, interesting article that talked a lot about like just his whole thought process and his recording habits and his gear and all this kind of stuff. And that sort of thing really like kind of blew my mind and kind of elevated him to like this man of like electronic music. You know what I mean?
He is like a mad scientist of electronic music. And yeah, Cyro like comes with a list of every piece of equipment used on it, which is like awesome. I honestly wish like more, especially electronic musicians, did that kind of thing, because, you know, everyone's just like kind of gear nerds, like collecting all kinds of shit, and it's like impossible to tell what's being used. And even, you know, when you look through this list of Cyro instruments, like you probably only recognize, you know, a handful of them, if that. But you know, it's just like super cool to look things up.
Well, that's the like reason that Aphex Twin, you know, Richard D. James has this like fervent cult following, is he seems like this mad scientist, like just genius, like otherworldly genius, where, you know, and he's got that whole like smart ass kind of attitude where like he never answers questions correctly and stuff. He like fucks with people, like they want him to remix his stuff and he like gives them some stupid thing that has nothing to do with the original sound, you know, song or whatever. And, you know, you get this like picture in your mind of this guy that literally knows how to play and how to like disassemble and reassemble every piece of electronic equipment ever made. Like, it can't be true, but you know, him doing a record like this is him like just, that is just what I picture when I imagine him, is like just this genius. Like,
yeah,
nobody could ever do what he does.
It's crazy. Like if I had a magic genie or whatever, and I could, you know, switch minds with somebody, that's exactly what I would love to be able to do, is just like know every, you know, weird piece of electronic equipment that like literally no one else gives a shit about. But yeah, that is maybe one of my favorite parts about him, is you know, just that vast like knowledge in something that's just so useless, really.
Yeah, so that's the sense of humor that you get to see with this release that everybody loves about Richard D. James. But, you know, to get into the record proper, who can describe the sound here? How's it different from the last couple of releases, or is it?
Yeah, it is a little different, at least. I mean, because it does like base around this Cheetah MS-800, which I didn't really know what it sounded like until this album. But this one is like a lot more straight, kind of like a techno sound to it. It's I always find it hard to like describe what like electronic things sound like, but like this one is like much more normal, of like just a normal techno. Like if a layman just thinks of electronic music, I think that this is the kind of sound that they think about.
Yeah, you know, I'm not nearly as knowledgeable as either of you two when it comes to like electronic music. So I'm sort of just listening to this based on like what knowledge I have of Aphex Twin. And for some reason, nothing really jumped out at me that really made me feel like I was listening to an Aphex Twin album. And I don't know if that's total sacrilege to even say that, but if I were to separate it and just say like, if this was just a different artist altogether, not Aphex Twin, you know, would I even enjoy it? Would I really identify with it? And I don't know. And I used to kind of feel that way about Aphex Twin with some of even his classic albums. And it took a while. It took a lot of listening to really enjoy those albums. So maybe this one requires more of my attention. But what about you, Gabe?
Well, the sound of it, I don't know if I can agree with you, Dan, that it sounds like, you know, what one would imagine electronic music to sound like. I think it's very much in the same vein of Cyro. And actually the last two EP releases that he's done were quite a bit different, but some of these tracks I think would fit in quite well on Cyro, and that's like really clean, kind of like, you know, the bass lines are like very fluid, and it's not like repetitive like I would say techno is or something. It's like these like silky smooth bass lines are just like moving all around the melody. The melody keeps changing, like every few bars there's like a little something different, and it's like, you know, the beginning of the track will be quite different from the end of the track. So I would say that as opposed to the last two releases, this I think is the one that I would expect to follow Cyro. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can agree with you there. Like it is kind of the most similar to Cyro out of the ones that we've gotten since then. You know, like the computer controlled acoustic one, that sounds nothing like pretty much anything he's done. But yeah, the clean is like a good, like Darin was saying, this is like it's like a clean sound. And I think I agree with Darin a lot in this. Is like, if this didn't have the Aphex Twin name on it, I don't think we would be talking about it right now.
I mean, you know, talking about like whether or not it's identifiably Aphex Twin, I think like track 5 and 6 particularly, you know, they're called like Circlon 3 and Circlon 1 or whatever.
Fuck him for his track listing names.
Yeah, but they have, you know, there's something, if you're not familiar with Aphex Twin, I assume everybody who's listening to this is, but if you're not, you know, he has like a very distinct melody. You know, sometimes you'll hear like a melody and you'll be like, that's a very Aphex Twin melody. So it's hard to describe in words if you haven't heard it. But those two tracks, I think, have that special quality, which is like, oh, this is a classic Aphex like bass line, or, you know, the melody here is, it's like, I don't know. I think you guys will come to find that, you know, maybe a year or two later, like you'll hear one of those two at a get together or something like that, maybe like a weirder friend you have, and you'll be like, oh, what is this like, is this like which Aphex Twin classic is this? And you'll be like, oh no, it's from Cheetah.
I cannot imagine that conversation ever happening.
I think you overestimate the friends I have that are not you.
All right, well, you get what I'm saying though. You'll hear it or something like that, and you'll think that it's on one of his like classic staple releases. I think those two tracks are of that quality, honestly.
I do agree that track 5, Circle on 3 or whatever, is the best one, and I think he knows it too. That's the one that is the single, and got the first music video from him in 14 years. So yeah. I think, you know, he recognizes that, and I definitely agree that it is the best one. I don't think anything on it rises to his classic level. I'm not shitting on this album. Or EP. It's still good. I just don't. You know, if somebody came to me and they said, I've never heard Aphex Twin, I want to get into them. Give me something to check out. This wouldn't be it. This is something I would leave for the fans.
Yeah, I would definitely kind of agree with both of you that Circle on 3 is a great song, and that one actually got 5 stars from me on my little iPod, and that was kind of that moment that I was like, all right, this is Aphex Twin for me. Like that was perfect. But this kind of brings to light a different question that I was sort of thinking about after listening to this a few times, and I've never really thought about this in terms of like electronic music, but like Aphex Twin has a long history. Like he has been around for a very long time. He has released quite a bit of music, and his back catalog has like staples, like absolute 5-star, 10 out of 10 classics.
Oh, for sure.
And how do you rate these sort of albums or these EPs that come out afterwards? Because like there's no way that you can think about them without considering these classics, kind of like what Dan was sort of mentioning. So like, do you think that there's another classic in Aphex Twin?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's just such a fucking like mad genius that there definitely will be, because like I was saying earlier, there's a lot of fucking off in between those classics, and I think that's just what he does. I mean, he has a shit ton of EPs and singles and just small releases. That's just what he does. I think he seems to me like the kind of person who just is always like in his studio or just always like making something. And so he's got so much shit that like, it's the shotgun thing. You're going to hit it eventually, if you release that much stuff or make that much stuff.
I think he's the kind of person that just makes, a lot of music. And, the myth about him is that he's got like hundreds of unfinished projects and stuff just sitting around that like he doesn't care to release because he's so brilliant. Like, who cares anyway? But and we don't know like when this little collection here was made. Maybe he literally just got this new synth, messed around with it, like wrote and recorded some pieces, and just stuck them away on the hard drive somewhere, and now just decided to release it. I think there was some sort of like, not writer's block, because he certainly has been writing, but there was some sort of like block with him where he just didn't feel like up to his old game of like major release, bunch of miniature, like interesting for fan only type releases, followed by another major release. But now he seems to kind of be back in that rhythm that he was in the 90s. So let me ask you guys to close here, because we spent a lot of time with Richard D. James, as you inevitably have to. Do you guys like that he's dropping these little albums again, or do you wish that he would just maybe stay silent and every few years put out like a major statement like Cyro was or something?
If it was somebody else, I would say like don't release like a bunch of okay EPs, like save it, make like an amazing album. But he's been doing this basically his entire career. And he's not that kind of person who like wastes, okay stuff on an EP, but then, doesn't make a great album because of that. He's got okay EPs, he's got excellent EPs, he's got fantastic albums. So I welcome, more and more of these rapid fire releases.
Yeah, I think he's obviously at a status now where it doesn't matter what he releases, like people will love it, and people are going to listen to it. And I think that, there's no sense in him, at this point trying to hold off and, waiting for however many years for like a major release. And, I agree with Gabe. I think he probably does have like some sort of massive catalog. So I say keep him coming. Not everything is going to be great. Not everything's going to be a classic, and that, no one should expect that. But, why not?
Yeah, well, do we agree with the score? 8.2, no BNM, of course. For me, I kind of like that score a lot. I think it's like a really just sort of strong, cool release. If you're an Aphex Twin fan, like you will probably really enjoy it. If you're a more casual listener and just, like his classics only, you can safely skip it. And so I kind of agree with the no B&M, but it's I enjoyed listening to it a ton, and I can't wait for him to release more stuff like this.
I completely agree with you and the score. It's if you are a huge fan, you'll love it. If you're a casual fan and you skip it, you didn't miss out on the greatest thing ever. But also at the same time, if you're a casual fan and you decide to check it out, you're not going to say, oh, what is this? You're still going to enjoy it, which I think is like, perfect for an 8.2. It's not a B&M. B&M, I think, means stop what you're doing, listen to this album. And that doesn't have this, but it's definitely enjoyable. It rises like just below that B&M level, which is exactly what an 8.2 is.
I agree with the both of you, and I think for one of the very few times in our brief history, we all are in complete agreement about a record. So make note of that.
To hear the rest of our discussion, check out our website, metaforkmusic.com, or search us out on iTunes, Metafork Music.